Right. Now, over the last couple of months, I think I've seen it. Greenpeace New Zealand have been involved in a roadshow, and their roadshow is in connection with nitrate testing. They started this nitrate issue some years ago, I think. I remember it being 2 or 3 years ago, where Greenpeace, who have become a very activist and I have to say slightly off skew organisation, and have embraced a large number of the causes that aren't environmental, but the ones that are, boy oh boy, they're right out there on something. They started up a nitrate map along with Dr. Mike Joy, if you remember. He gets sacked from Victoria University in the end. Anyhow, he's a water scientist. And there is a suggestion that nitrate levels in this country are causing risk to health and leading to a phenomena widely observed in very poor depressed countries called blue babies, where children who have nitrate poisoning at a young age have their development arrested quite significantly. Well, they've been going on a bit of a tour, Greenpeace, to highlight this, and as a consequence, they've done this more than once in actual fact, as I understand. I'm pretty sure they did it a couple of years ago. And they go and test nitrates. So they ask people to bring their drinking water to them, and they'll test it for nitrates. And in many cases, they suggest that there are nitrate poisoning in the water supply of many of our councils in this country, and they are deleterious to human health, and that they are certainly deleterious to reproductive health of women and small babies in this country. Well, one area that they went to was Gore. And they've been to Gore before because they like to say that Gore's town water supply is infected or infested with excess nitrate. This is a danger. And they ended up getting into a scrap a week or so ago with the mayor of Gore, who said that they're nothing more than scare merchants and that their tests are shonky. And that mayor, Gore Mayor Ben Bell, joins us now. Ben, thank you so much for joining us. How are you finding the new term so far?
Good morning. Yeah, it's a bit of fun, isn't it? Changes to regional councils is going to be interesting to see how that all shakes out. And yeah, but we've been all right. New councillors getting inducted, getting on with the job.
Yeah, well, you won't get the chance to take over the new council just yet. But I was just thinking, there's just three of you in that particular bailiwick, isn't it? It would be the mayor of Gore, you, the mayor of Southland, and then the mayor of Invercargill. You three are going to be in charge of the regional council in roughly 18 months, 2 years' time. Is that right? Is that the story?
That's the proposal as it stands. I mean, we've got a whole another election to go through before then, and there will undoubtedly be changes. But yeah, that's the proposal at the moment.
Yeah, it doesn't make
like
a lot
little
of
bit of
sense.
extra work.
Yeah, well, yeah, and like anything, yeah, that's your background as well. If you haven't got enough work to do already, listen, mate.
Yeah, exactly.
Just on this Greenpeace campaign, they pissed you off just quietly, and I haven't. You're a very mild-mannered person. You're the sort of Clark Kent of Gore, as a general rule, and you've drawn, despite enormous provocation over the last few years, people have impressed with the fact that you don't tend to get pissed off very much and exhibit that pissed offness. But you're pissed off with Greenpeace. Why?
I think it comes back to them defacing the trout. I think I'm pretty tolerant with a lot of stuff that happens in politics, but I think coming to our little town and getting a cherry picker and putting stuff on our trout, that's a step too far in my book to try and make a point which I believe isn't particularly valid. At the time we were over for our nitrates, we'd put a notice, we got it under control. Now it's just really trying to elongate a story that isn't really there.
Yeah, they put, I think, they tried to make a trout look dead, didn't they? And then they put in, "Welcome to Gore, where dirty dairy wrecked the water."
That's the one. Yeah.
That was the one. Yeah. Listen, basically the argument is that you've got a nitrate water problem and dairy farming has raised or has caused it. What's your response to those two claims?
Yeah, so we do have a nitrate issue at the moment. That's no secret. Our bore that we draw most of Gore's water from does have high nitrates. We're pumping from the river at the moment, which helps dilute that. So actually, the water that's coming out the tap is perfectly fine. But where this is coming from is really up to the regional council to figure out, and they've come up inconclusive. I get a little bit tired of just picking on dairy farmers because they're an easy way out. Nitrates can come from all sorts of different sources. They can also just be naturally found within the soils as well. So you could just have hit a pocket of nitrate that's flowing through to shame an entire industry. That there's lots of dairy farming. We've got a second well that doesn't have nitrates in it. There's plenty of intensive dairy farming above that well as well. So to just pick an industry and to blame them seems a little bit far-fetched to me.
Okay. So you also had a real pushback at the testing that they were engaged in, and the suggestion was that your tests that your council does are more scientific and accurate than theirs. Is that correct?
Yeah, so we have two sets of testing now. One, we've got some probes, which are about as accurate as the testing systems that they've got. So they give a reading of every 15 minutes, but they won't be accepted by the water regulator because they have an error rate that's too high. You really need them lab tested. You need to collect a sample, have it temperature controlled and lab tested. That's the only thing the water regulator will accept. Taking in your own glass of water and having a probe put in it, yep, we'll give you a decent idea of what's happening, but it's not the accuracy that people are probably looking for.
Greenpeace Aotearoa's Executive Director, Dr. Russell Norman, the former Green MP, said that there's a massive scientific evidence that shows intensive dairy results in nitrate leaching into groundwater. And he went on to say, and in Gore, of course, one of the water sources for the towns is located on a dairy farm. So the connection between dairy intensification and contamination of water sources is extremely well established. Are you telling me that the bore that you've got on the dairy farm isn't contaminated by nitrate?
No, because they've got a bore on their farm that has perfectly normal nitrate levels in, and we've got a shallower bore at the same site that also doesn't have any nitrate issues as well. The Cooper's Well 4, which is the one that has high nitrates, is quite deep, so actually the source of that will be quite a few kilometres up the road and over a large catchment. So no, the dairy farm of where the bore is certainly won't be directly affecting that bore. It's very deep.
So obviously he's drawn 1 and 1 and got 5. Okay, well that seems fairly normal for a Green MP. Listen, what's happened since that? I assume now did you have to take down the signs that they'd erected and the changes to the fish that they'd made? Was that you that did that, your council?
Yeah, it was our parks team that got up there and took it down. I think we've still got the sign somewhere or other. Could auction it, maybe pay down some rates, maybe if anyone will buy it.
No, it's just interesting. You could also send them the bill. So they've left now, having made this stunt. Did people turn up and have their water tested by these people, by Greenpeace?
Yeah, people did. I mean, I'll be a little bit lenient and say I think the testing service is perfectly fine. I mean, I think it's a bit counterproductive because we do that for people. That's why they pay their rates to make sure they've got safe water. But hey, if people want to get it tested, that's fine. What I struggle with is we tested, so we got about 5.1 milligrams per litre. They got 4.8, which is fine. So the international standard is 11.3. So that's the rule in New Zealand. It's also the rule across the world to protect against those diseases that you were talking about. They're advocating for a 5 milligram limit, which is perfectly fine. But to run a story when the reading they got was 4.8, so under the limit that they're looking for, it's a bit of a stretch. It's kind of like they didn't get the results they wanted and then they've just run the story anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, no, fair enough. Listen, the 11.3, which is, I think, an international standard, actually, isn't it, Ben? And that's
Yeah,
just simply been picked,
certainly is. Yeah.
and it's
Yeah.
been picked up by us in New Zealand. Um, you're saying you're half of that. I mean, you don't have a problem, do you? Really? I mean, even despite everything.
I wouldn't think so. I mean, the water is perfectly fine to drink anything below that 11.3. So yeah, half of it is even below the change that they're trying to make as well.
Hmm. If Greenpeace come, well, this is not. They came to your place. You would have been mayor then too. The last time in 2023, they've come
Hmm.
again in 2025. They are a society based upon alarm, really, aren't they? Because their fundraising is all campaign based. So unless they can do these sorts of stunts and suggest there's a problem, people won't donate them money. It's a perverse incentive to sensationalise, isn't it, really?
Yeah, I don't really understand the end goal other than lowering the limits on nitrate, which would hamstring more councils around the country in terms of the upgrades they'd have to do. I mean, to
Mm,
do a reverse osmosis plant, which would eliminate nitrates, that's a $1 to $2 million upgrade just there.
mm.
When we connect up our two wells through our under the river pipe connection, that'll do like the well, and we'll have next to no nitrate issues, all things going well. So I don't really understand what the end goal is other than to make a bit of a scene.
Well, I was going to say the resonance, though, and headlines like this generate their own reaction. Usually, they're designed to. I mean, it's how the media operate as well.
Yeah,
Um, are there people now fearful as a consequence of this story and these actions?
I think so. I mean, they see it, and then it's very easy to do your own research and get carried away with evidence that might not be accurate. I guess what people can have assurance in is that we have a water regulator in New Zealand now that has been set up for the exact purpose of making sure that we have good quality drinking water in New Zealand. And unless we breach any of the standards, then the water will be perfectly fine to drink. And we'll make that very clear if it's not fine to drink.
Okay, and
But
and
yes,
that's we.
I think that scaremongering has worked to a certain extent if people are more cautious, for sure.
And it's not possible, is it? I mean, boiling water doesn't get rid of them. You've just got to,
No.
you either provide it or you don't. I think in Waimate's case, they just shut it out one day and said, right, we're not going to. They brought tankers into town and you had to do that. They then created their own nitrate plant, I think. You're not in that
Yes,
particular position, though, are you?
we were in that position. So when they defaced the trout, we were in that scenario. So we had a reading of 11.4, so we were zero point 0.1 over.
Mm.
That automatically institutes a 3-day. You have to have 3 days of clear tests under the 11.3, and you bring in water tankers because you can't boil the water, and also you don't know which areas have the high nitrates and which don't. So you've got to wait for it to completely flush out of the system before you can restart. So, and that comes into effect basically as soon as you get that reading.
But the thing that strikes me, Ben, is that you've had a high reading. You just said 11.4 at your Cooper's well in Gore. You decide to shut down the bore as a consequence of that. Fair enough. 3 days later, it's fine. That's odd, isn't it? You would expect nitrate levels to remain relatively static, you would have thought.
So that's only because we were pumping from the river. So we came up with the idea of pumping directly into the river, which has low nitrates, into that bore to dilute it to then be able to use the subsequent water.
All
So
right,
that's how
so
we
it
lowered
would
it.
be
And we
that
and we
if you hadn't have done that, it would still be static. That would still be roughly the reading.
Exactly, yeah, and that's probably the most concerning thing is that usually you see nitrate spikes. That bore, so when we had the power outage because of the wind, the
Mm,
pump wasn't running, and those nitrates started to escalate quite quickly again. So that's where we really need that connection,
mm,
so we have that constant dilution, so we don't run into these problems.
mm. And finally, talking about the wind, have they finished cleaning up, or is it that still ongoing, that process?
Yeah, we're pretty good at a district level. There's obviously still quite a few trees down in rural areas. I know there's a lot of farmers who are just kind of chipping away at it as they can. There are other areas with a bit more significant damage that'll take a while. But in terms of the response and recovery, yeah, we're through the worst of it.
All right, good on you. And as I said before, congratulations again upon being re-elected with such a significant backing from your population. All power to you, mate.
Thank you very much, and all the best for the upcoming changes as well in your
Oh, well,
woods.
there's a lot of water to go under that bridge, as you well know, Ben, before we finally find out.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay, mate, look after yourself. Have a great weekend. Ben Bell, the Mayor of Gore, on the latest excursion. Listen, the reason I was after that story was because I've signed up for Greenpeace. Now, I haven't paid any money. I'm on their mailing list. But if I was to take if I was to take everything that I see or the emails that come from Greenpeace during a given week, I'd believe that I was living in New Delhi probably. That I wouldn't be able to go outside and breathe any fresh air because there wasn't any. That everything was polluted. That we were systematically eradicating and destroying the entire native flora and fauna of this country, and that we're basically going to hell in a handbasket. It's a scary stuff. And then at the end of every one of those particular scary emails, there's a blandishment to give them money so that they can stop this. All right. So it's almost old-fashioned religion, and that's exactly the analogy I want to make. That it is. If you'd gone in the 18th or 19th century to some hellfire and brimstone preacher back in England or Scotland, they had a particular way in which they would address the. I'll tell you who would do it now. Brian Tamaki does exactly the same for Destiny Church, but he wouldn't be alone. God, a whole series of sort of born again or Pentecostal movements in this country do as well. And what they do is they show you the pits of hell. So they say, this is how bad it's going to be. These are the torments that will be visited upon you. This is eternity in hell, and this is what they're going to do to you for eternity. And then at the last moment, they say, unless, and then the preacher drags you back from the hell that you're just about to fall into and says, you accept the Lord and blah, blah, blah. Well, Greenpeace 200 years later are still employing essentially those tactics, except the preacher didn't want money. Now, modern preachers might, but back in the 18th and 19th century, they were just happy to save your soul. So they hadn't monetized, if you liked, the gift of salvation. That took the genius of the Americans to do in the 20th century. No. But Greenpeace is exactly the same. Now, Greenpeace would say we're not a religious organisation. They are. They are a religious organisation in all sense of the word. They've just replaced Christianity with this green worship cult, and then determined that it is at risk, and it can only be saved. No, not by you converting. Well, yes, by you converting your cash into their account. That's, yes. So I guess there is a conversion that takes place, except it's financial.